Hi Steve, Nathan here. Just reflecting on cycles 1 and 2 for a bit of background knowledge before my final assessment 3. The student that I used for my assignment was Sam. His name's Sam, a Year 10 student. And the way I went about the project was that I wanted to make it quite personal for him, just like in Kay's lecture, the latest lecture that was given. Um, I wanted to make it very personal for him, but I also went about the project in a very um, slowed down manner because the particular student is dyslexic. So I kind of went in a bit cautious at first just to see um, how he'd cope with the text I was using. The text that I used was Human Anatomy and Physiology. It's actually our text for regional anatomy and systematic anatomy at university, and I thought I was doing anatomy with my prac class, and I thought it would be a good text for him to use. Um, Cycle 1, watching him read, he seemed to be coping fairly well. Didn't really read out aloud until I gave him hints and said, can you please read out aloud or let me know what you're thinking as you read, if you're struggling with anything. And we got through that session, and I thought that he coped fairly well. But moving on to the next um, cycle 2, it changed a great deal. He was reading out aloud, and I could see that he was not coping very well with some particular larger words. But the general idea and enthusiasm was there. He was really getting into some of the pronunciation and the terminology, and he seemed to have background knowledge from being a rugby player about certain muscles in the body, which was what we were reading about in the lower arm. Um, he seemed to use a lot of actions, just like university students do, to understand. And I think this worked really well because when we sit in an exam and we had particular reason, we used our knowledge and thought back and used actions to make it make sense in our own personal way. And he did that really well, and it was great to see that light bulb go off pretty early with him to understand to use that um, form of movement. Um, so in the second session, I wanted him to read the same passage again, and we did so. And we also looked at a glossary of key terms for a general anatomy, so he had a rough idea. Watched a video about certain actions and movements, and um, reading out aloud. Yeah, so reading out aloud made a major difference. So out of the second cycle, reflecting on SWOT, his strengths were the actions, asking questions, reading out aloud. Weaknesses were his big words, pronunciation, and working out where muscles basically were. Um, Opportunities I saw as the opportunity for him to understand the bigger picture to do with something he's very interested in. So, health and fitness and muscle groups, which he works on in the gym a fair bit. Threats probably were probably the big picture that he was reading. I made out that it was quite a difficult text to understand, and being dyslexic, I wasn't sure whether he'd be able to cope with it, but he seemed. I picked a fairly straightforward passage for him to read with some big muscles, and yeah, so I think the threat really daunted on him was that there was some big words, anatomical terms that he struggled to get through. And it reminded me a lot of Kay's lecture when she said the struggling reader guesses and doesn't even read it. They skim through the big parts and just try to leave it all behind. But um, initially, that is what Sam did, and during the second session, I cut that out. So, yeah, So the second session was a lot better, and we were prepared for the third session, which will be conducted. So, cycle three. Reflecting from cycle two, um, and SWAT, the strengths that Sam had was his background knowledge on anatomy in terms of him playing rugby union. Weaknesses were due to the fact that he's dyslexic. Reading a few terms, anatomical terms, seemed to be a challenge for him. Opportunities, I think, were to engage in a more difficult text. And at the end of the second session, he actually said to me, Nathan, this is great to see the muscles and how detailed they actually go into. And he was really chuffed with being able to learn more in depth about what he actually does to his muscles when he performs. And the threats were, yeah, in conjunction with the weaknesses, the big words, and knowing that the anatomy textbook is quite a big one was pretty daunting for him. Um, so reflecting for the last session, I kind of thought back to the way that Sam was reading, and um, the core point that I would like to raise, which the single moment positively, which led to a breakthrough in my own personal practice, was seeing the light bulb go off with Sam in relation to the text and linking that to an image or the muscle. So hand in hand, um, Sam putting that together. I think that worked really well. So for the next session, that's what I wanted to kind of base it on. I still wanted um, a bit of reading involved, but I also wanted to use diagrams with text as well to utilize his visual learning ability. Um, so within the textbook, there is a website which I used throughout doing anatomy, um, and it's called MyAMP, which is a website which is really handy for study. And we went on there, and there is an interacting video which you can use and click on different parts, and it goes into detail about that. Um, and that was again really useful, and that's where the breakthrough came. Seeing Sam using his actions, reading quite a difficult text based on the glossary and previous terms I told him, and really engaging with the text and understanding and being enthusiastic about the text. Um, so for this session, I wanted to change it up because he seemed to be a bit bored with reading just about the arm, so he moved on to the leg. So after we did the interactual piece on the website, we moved on to the lower leg. So we're learning about the lower leg, the hamstrings and quadriceps, major muscles in the body. Um, so yeah, we started by watching that, going online and doing that interactive, and then he read a passage from the lower leg, which again had terms which I went over first, and he read out aloud, and he coped a lot better this time. He got to the difficult words and slowed down and just broke them down, which was great. Um, with relation to Talani's text, raising again that he used the fix-up strategies, background knowledge of his own life and interests. He reread, so when he was reading big words, he didn't skim over them before. He went back to them, reread, slowly broke them down, and noticing patterns or phonics, which I picked up in Kay's lecture. Phonics, understanding patterns. So he understood patterns with description of muscles, and he understood the general terms with regard to these. And at the end of the session, Sam was like really chuffed with how everything went. He liked doing he liked doing the piece online. He loved going onto that interactual website and seeing the muscles highlighted and like going into depth and taking off pieces of layers of the body. Um, Counting for what went well and what didn't. I think the large words still were a major issue, but with only conducting 3 sessions, I think you're not going to pick uh, difficult terms up that easily. He coped fairly well, but I think what worked well was a range of activities. So um, reading a difficult piece of text for half the sessions and then using some visualization, using images on the following pages, looking at various videos to get some knowledge, just visual knowledge, so that he has an understanding of where these are. Um, if I was going to plan a next session, I think I would maybe go back a step. So, utilizing quite a difficult text, I think I would go back to a more basic muscle tone and maybe one specific muscle group, one, so that it's not too in depth and confusing for Samuel. Um, yeah, just make it a lot more basic. Use visual again.